A few days after King Charles II of Spain died in November of 1700, the silence inside Madrid's royal palace was broken only by the quiet footsteps of physicians preparing for a grim task. The king was gone. Now they needed to understand why. As royal doctors carefully examined the body of the last Spanish Habsburg king, they encountered a sight that left even experienced physicians astonished. Contemporary accounts describe a body that appeared worn down by decades of illness. His organs showed signs of severe deterioration. His heart was said to be unusually small. His lungs were damaged. His stomach and intestines displayed evidence of chronic disease. Some reports even claimed that several internal organs had almost completely wasted away. Whether every detail recorded by later writers was medically accurate remains debated by historians. But there was little disagreement about one fact: Charles II had been sick for nearly his entire life. Many who knew him believed it was extraordinary that he had survived until the age of 38. Yet the most remarkable part of this story is not the condition of his body after death. It is the extraordinary chain of decisions that shaped his life long before he was born. Because Charles II did not become a tragic king through bad luck alone. He inherited centuries of royal ambition, and that ambition would destroy one of Europe's greatest dynasties. During the 17th century, Spain remained one of the most powerful kingdoms on earth. Its empire stretched across continents, from the silver mines of South America to the islands of the Caribbean, from the rich cities of Italy to the Netherlands, from trading posts in Asia to colonies across the Americas. Spanish influence reached farther than almost any other European nation. Treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic, carrying enormous fortunes in gold and silver. Spanish soldiers had once dominated battlefields throughout Europe. Its kings ruled over millions of people living thousands of miles apart. To the outside world, the Spanish monarchy appeared almost invincible. Its palaces glittered with unimaginable wealth. Its churches displayed priceless works of art. Its royal family represented prestige, tradition, and divine authority. But appearances can be deceptive. Behind the magnificent ceremonies, luxurious palaces, and priceless crowns, a dangerous problem had been growing for generations. Unlike many royal families that sought alliances through marriage with distant noble houses, the Spanish Habsburgs repeatedly chose husbands and wives from within their own family. Political security mattered more than biological diversity. Every marriage was carefully arranged to keep territories united. Every wedding strengthened dynastic control. Uncles married nieces. First cousins married one another. Close relatives became husbands and wives generation after generation. At the time, few people understood genetics. The science simply did not exist. Royal advisors focused on politics. Church officials approved marriages through special dispensations. Kings believed they were protecting their empire. Instead, they were quietly weakening it. Each generation inherited not only royal titles and enormous wealth, but also an increasing number of harmful genetic traits. No one represented those consequences more completely than Charles II. He was born on November 6, 1661. For his father, King Philip IV, the birth brought enormous relief. The aging monarch desperately needed a surviving male heir. His reign had already been marked by heartbreaking personal loss. Several children had died before reaching adulthood. Each funeral deepened fears that the Spanish Habsburg line might come to an end. When Charles finally entered the world, bells rang in celebration. Prayers were offered across the kingdom. Courtiers congratulated one another. Spain had its prince. Or so everyone hoped. Celebration, however, quickly gave way to concern. The infant appeared unusually fragile. He cried weakly. He struggled to feed. Doctors noticed almost immediately that his physical development seemed slower than expected. As months passed, the differences became impossible to ignore. Charles learned to walk much later than other children. Even standing without assistance could be difficult. His muscles remained weak. His legs required braces for support. Those around him constantly worried that another illness might claim his life. And illness arrived again and again. Measles, chickenpox, rubella, smallpox. High fevers followed by painful recoveries became a familiar part of his childhood. Each disease threatened to become his last, yet somehow he survived every one. Every recovery felt like a miracle, but every illness left lasting damage. His body never seemed able to rebuild its strength completely. While other princes learned horseback riding, swordsmanship, hunting, and military exercises, Charles often remained indoors recovering from another period of sickness. His education progressed slowly as well. Some foreign ambassadors reported that he struggled to concentrate for long periods. Others believed his intellectual abilities had been exaggerated by political rivals. Modern historians continue to debate exactly how capable he truly was. What cannot be disputed is that his physical condition placed enormous limitations on nearly every aspect of his life. Nothing reflected those struggles more visibly than his face. For centuries, members of the Habsburg family had possessed a distinctive jawline that later became known as the Habsburg jaw. The feature appeared in portraits throughout Europe. In Charles, however, it reached an extreme unlike any previous generation. His lower jaw projected so far forward that his upper and lower teeth barely met. Closing his mouth comfortably became difficult. Chewing food required tremendous effort. Many meals took far longer than normal because he simply could not bite properly. Speaking clearly presented another challenge. Foreign visitors sometimes struggled to understand him. Portrait painters attempted to soften his appearance. Diplomats described it in confidential reports. Travelers carried stories back to other European courts. Soon whispers spread across the continent. What was wrong with the King of Spain? Some believed God was punishing the royal family. Others insisted that dark magic had been used against the young prince. Astrologers claimed the stars had predicted his suffering. Priests organized prayers. Exorcists were even consulted by members of the court. Eventually, Charles acquired a nickname that followed him for the rest of his life: the Bewitched King. To modern ears, the title sounds almost absurd, but 17th century Europe remained deeply religious and highly superstitious. When science failed to explain unusual illnesses, many people searched for supernatural answers. The truth, however, was both simpler and more tragic. Centuries later, geneticists and historians reconstructed the Habsburg family tree in remarkable detail. Their findings revealed just how closely related Charles's parents truly were. His father, Philip IV, had married his own niece, Mariana of Austria. That single marriage was only one example among many. The same ancestors appeared repeatedly throughout the family tree. Instead of branching outward like most families, the Habsburg lineage folded back on itself again and again. Modern researchers have estimated Charles's level of inbreeding to be extraordinarily high, comparable to what might be expected from the child of siblings. The consequences accumulated over generations: weak immune systems, developmental problems, physical abnormalities, reduced fertility. Charles inherited them all. He was not responsible for the decisions that shaped his health. Those choices had been made long before his birth, by rulers determined to preserve political power at any cost. Then, in 1665, tragedy struck once again. King Philip IV died. Charles was only 4 years old. The sickly little boy who still struggled with ordinary childhood tasks suddenly became King of Spain. Officially, one of the most powerful empires in history now belonged to a child. In reality, he was far too young and far too fragile to govern. The responsibility fell to his mother, Queen Mariana of Austria, who became regent. She ruled in her son's name while navigating a kingdom already showing signs of decline. The Spain Charles would one day inherit remained vast. Its empire still inspired respect, but beneath the surface, dangerous cracks had begun to appear. The treasury suffered repeated financial crises. Inflation weakened the economy. Agriculture struggled. Military defeats became more frequent. France, under the ambitious King Louis XIV, watched Spain's growing weakness with increasing interest. Inside the royal court, rival factions competed fiercely for influence over the young king. Every advisor claimed to know what was best for Spain. Every noble family sought greater power. Every foreign ambassador reported home about Charles's health. Because one question overshadowed every political decision: would the young king live long enough and remain healthy enough to secure the future of the Spanish Habsburg dynasty? At the time, No one could answer, but Europe was already preparing for the possibility that the answer might be no. As Charles entered his teenage years, it became increasingly clear that Spain's greatest problem was no longer its treasury, its wars, or even its declining influence. It was its king. Every royal court in Europe wanted to know the same thing. Could Charles II actually rule, or would others continue ruling in his name? Foreign ambassadors became some of the closest observers of the young monarch. They wrote long reports back to Paris, Vienna, London, and Rome, describing almost every detail of his daily life. Some painted an encouraging picture. They described Charles as gentle, courteous, and deeply religious. He enjoyed hunting whenever his health allowed it. He treated servants with kindness. Unlike many rulers of his era, he was not known for cruelty or violent outbursts. But nearly every report returned to the same concern. His body remained painfully weak. His illnesses never truly disappeared. Some mornings he could barely leave his chambers. At times he suffered from severe exhaustion. On other occasions, stomach problems or recurring fevers confined him to bed for days. The demands of ruling the largest empire in Europe required endless meetings, military decisions, diplomatic negotiations, and public ceremonies. Charles struggled simply to endure them. His mother, Mariana of Austria, continued to dominate the government during much of his youth. She relied heavily on trusted advisors, particularly the Austrian Jesuit priest, Juan Everardo Nithard. That decision proved deeply unpopular. Many Spanish nobles believed foreigners had gained too much influence over their kingdom. Court politics soon became vicious. Powerful aristocrats formed competing factions. Every appointment became a political battle. Every royal decision created new enemies. Instead of presenting a united government, Spain's court increasingly resembled a battlefield where influence mattered more than loyalty. Charles often found himself caught in the middle. He was king, yet many doubted how much authority he truly possessed. As he reached adulthood, pressure mounted for him to assume direct control of the monarchy. Officially, he became old enough to govern. In practice, powerful ministers continued competing to guide, or manipulate, his decisions. Some historians argue that Charles was more politically aware than his reputation suggests. Although physically frail, he occasionally demonstrated determination when choosing advisors or dismissing unpopular officials. He understood more than many foreign diplomats realized. The greater problem was not necessarily his intelligence, it was his health. His body simply could not keep pace with the enormous responsibilities placed upon him. Meanwhile, Spain itself continued to weaken. Decades of expensive wars had emptied the royal treasury. Silver shipments from the Americas no longer produced the prosperity they once had. Inflation had damaged the economy. Harvest failures caused food shortages in several regions. Taxes grew heavier, while opportunities became fewer. Across Europe, rival powers sensed that Spain was no longer the unstoppable empire it had once been. No country watched more closely than France. Its ruler, the ambitious Louis XIV, dreamed of expanding French influence across Europe. Every sign of Spanish weakness represented an opportunity. But before questions of war could be answered, another issue demanded immediate attention. The king needed a wife. This was not simply a matter of romance. It was a matter of survival. Without children, the future of the Spanish monarchy remained uncertain. Without an heir, generations of carefully arranged dynastic marriages would have achieved nothing. Europe's balance of power depended on what happened next. After months of negotiations, a bride was selected. Her name was Marie-Louise of Orléans. She was the daughter of Philippe I, Duke of Orléans, and the niece of Louis XIV of France. Young, elegant, and admired for her beauty, Marie-Louise had spent her childhood in the dazzling court of Versailles. Compared with Madrid, Versailles seemed alive with music, fashion, theater, and celebration. Spain's court was very different. Its traditions were rigid, its ceremonies were formal. Its atmosphere was deeply influenced by strict Catholic customs. When Marie-Louise learned she would marry Charles II, she reportedly broke down in tears. Some accounts claim she cried for days. Whether every detail is true or not, historians agree that she had little choice. Royal daughters rarely married for love, they married for diplomacy. Their personal happiness mattered far less than the political alliances their marriages created. In 1679, at just 17 years old, Marie-Louise arrived in Spain. She had never met the man she was about to marry. Across Europe, people wondered what she would think when she finally saw him. Charles's unusual appearance was already famous. Stories of his illnesses had spread from one royal court to another. Many expected the marriage to become another cold political arrangement. Instead, something unexpected happened. Charles genuinely fell in love, almost immediately. He adored his young queen. He preferred spending time with her whenever possible. He laughed more often. Members of the court noticed a remarkable change in his mood. For perhaps the first time since childhood, Charles appeared truly happy. Marie-Louise treated him with kindness and patience. She did not mock his appearance. She accompanied him on walks, hunts, and palace gatherings whenever his health permitted. Although theirs had begun as a diplomatic marriage, it gradually developed into one built on real affection. Observers described Charles as completely devoted to his wife. He disliked being separated from her even briefly. For a king who had spent much of his life surrounded by political intrigue and constant scrutiny, Marie-Louise became a source of comfort. Yet beneath their happiness lay an enormous problem. Months passed, then years. No pregnancy came. At first, few people worried. Royal families often waited several years before producing children. But as time continued to pass, anxiety spread throughout Europe. The future of an empire depended on a single royal birth. Every month without an heir increased political uncertainty. Rumors began circulating inside the palace. Some blamed the queen. Others quietly blamed the king. Doctors recommended strange medical treatments. Court physicians prescribed special diets. Astrologers examined planetary alignments. Religious advisors organized prayers and pilgrimages. Nothing worked. As pressure intensified, Marie-Louise herself became the target of growing criticism. Many believed she had failed in her most important duty. She reportedly suffered from loneliness and depression within the rigid Spanish court. Far from the lively world of Versailles, she found Madrid increasingly isolating. Only Charles's affection seemed to offer relief. He defended her whenever criticism arose. He refused to blame her for their childlessness. Their relationship remained unusually warm by royal standards. Then tragedy struck without warning. On February 12, 1689, after nearly 10 years of marriage, Marie-Louise suddenly became seriously ill. Within hours, she was dead. She was only 26 years old. Her unexpected death shocked the kingdom. Almost immediately, rumors spread through Europe. Had she been poisoned? Had political enemies removed her? Or had illness simply claimed another young royal? Modern historians generally believe she most likely died from natural causes, possibly acute appendicitis or another sudden medical condition. But certainty is impossible. The medical knowledge of the 17th century was limited, and speculation flourished. Charles was devastated. Witnesses described him as inconsolable. He reportedly remained beside her body for hours. He wept openly. Some said he never fully recovered from the loss. For years, Marie-Louise had been the brightest part of his difficult life. Now she was gone. Yet, even in grief, the machinery of royal politics did not stop. Spain still had no heir. The king was only 27 years old. European diplomats immediately resumed negotiations for another marriage. Charles scarcely had time to mourn before discussions about a new queen began. Because for the ministers surrounding him, the future of an empire mattered more than the broken heart of a lonely king. And soon, Charles II would be asked to marry again. The fate of the Spanish Habsburg dynasty depended on it. But unknown to everyone in Europe, time was already running out. Only months after the death of Marie-Louise, Europe once again turned its attention to the lonely King of Spain. His grief was still fresh, yet the future of an empire could not wait. The Spanish court quickly arranged a second marriage, this time to Maria Anna of Neuburg, a German princess whose family was famous for producing many healthy children. To Spain's ministers, she seemed like the perfect choice. If anyone could provide the desperately needed heir, surely it would be her. But once again, hope slowly faded. Months turned into years. Still no child was born. The whispers that had once surrounded the first queen returned with even greater force. This time, however, fewer people blamed the queen. Increasingly, physicians and foreign diplomats concluded that the problem lay with Charles himself. His health continued to deteriorate. He suffered from constant infections, digestive illnesses, and overwhelming exhaustion. Some days he was too weak to attend meetings of his own council. His once fragile body appeared to be failing piece by piece. Rather than accepting a medical explanation, many members of the royal court embraced superstition. Some insisted the king had been cursed. Others believed dark magic had stolen his strength. Exorcisms were reportedly performed inside the royal palace, with priests attempting to drive evil spirits from the exhausted monarch. Charles himself, deeply religious and surrounded by people who believed such claims, reportedly accepted that he might indeed be bewitched. While the king searched for spiritual answers, Europe's rulers prepared for a political crisis. Everyone knew Charles would almost certainly die without an heir. The only question was who would inherit the greatest empire in Europe. France claimed the throne through family ties. Austria claimed it through another branch of the Habsburg family. England and the Dutch Republic feared that either outcome could upset the balance of power across the continent. By the autumn of 1700, Charles was dying. Unable to reverse decades of illness, his physicians could do little except watch as the last Spanish Habsburg grew weaker with each passing day. On November 1st, 1700, King Charles II died at the age of just 38. With him died not only a king, but an entire dynasty. Within months, Europe erupted into the War of the Spanish Succession, a conflict that would reshape the continent for years to come. The tragedy of Charles II had become the tragedy of Europe itself.